the college football playoff and blowouts. Those two things are synonymous, and there is a real path that Arizona State finds itself blowing out Texas. This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Sun Devils crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12 and Locked On Sun Devils. Thank you for making these two shows your first listen every single day. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. That's Richie Bradshaw talking all things Arizona State every day. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. And Arizona State has a path to blow out Texas. That might sound like, oh, he's just going to be blowing hot air off my skirt. No, I've got it mapped out here, and it's actually pretty simple. Also, college football, ESPN, they're out on Arizona State. They don't think the Sun Devils have a chance. Let's talk about how that network continues to spite us, and if it's fair, if what they're saying is true. Also, BYU, Cincinnati, Colorado, Utah, Arizona State proves it might be the best new addition to this conference. Let's start right there with the college football playoff, though, in this Texas game. Richie Bradshaw, picture. Cam Scatterbo runs the football in the first carry of the game for 23 yards. Are you shocked by that?
No.
Not whatsoever.
Not in the
right?
slightest.
Cam Scatterbo for 23 yards. How about the Guillory kid at wide receiver who was a redshirt and now he's just playing football, catches the ball for 15 yards in the second play from Sam Levitt? Any qualms there?
I don't think so, because I think that ASU is going to scheme an offensive a passing attack to try and counter a really, really good secondary.
Right. So we're on script right now. Arizona State's drawn up a script for the first 1, 2, 3 drives. We'll say that at the end of the first drive, Arizona State's up 7-0. Wouldn't be shocked whatsoever by that. Then on the first Texas possession, Quinn Ewers does what he does best, throws an interception, gives the ball back to Arizona State. Let's say it's some miracle from God. Arizona State kicks a field goal and makes it, or scores a touchdown. The path to a blowout here is forcing Texas to throw the football. We know the Longhorns can run, but if Arizona State does what it does best, gets up early, gets hot early in this win streak, look at the Arizona game, look at the BYU game, Arizona State has won by getting up early. Quinn Ewers is not a good enough quarterback. Texas fans have told me that he's not a good enough quarterback to lead them back from a deficit. He's shown that against Georgia a couple of times this year. He is too turnover prone. If this game is a 7, 10, 13, 14 point lean toward Arizona State early, it's over.
He's good to win a national championship. They need a good supporting cast around him, and they provided that, but I do agree that if you put Ewers in a scenario where it's entirely on him and you take away the support of the run game and stuff like that, I do think this game becomes significantly more difficult for Texas. The good news is Isaiah Bond is going to play for them. That came out on a Sunday, so he's got another weapon there. But if this entire game is placed on Ewers' shoulders, it's going to be more difficult for Texas to win than if it was going to be more balanced. And if ASU is able to get off to that hot start that you mentioned, they go down the field, they score a touchdown, and then they get a turnover on the next drive, that's going to shift momentum, and it's going to shift it very, very quickly. So from there, it's going to be up to ASU to stay on top of that momentum. They can't let it go at any point, because me and you, look, we're not Texas fans. We don't pretend to be Texas fans, but they're a good team. And if you allow them to stay in this game, it's going to be tough. And I do think there's a path for ASU to win a close game anyways. But to get the blowout that you're hoping for, I would love it. I would manifest it. They have got to make the most of every single situation that arises for them. So those turnovers, those can't be missed drives. You've got to get points on those drives. Any extra opportunities, short field position, turnover on downs, whatever it might be, you just have to make the most of those opportunities. And we know ASU can score. We also know Texas has an elite defense. We'll see what happens, but Sam Levitt is playing as hot as any quarterback in college football right now. Texas fans got mad at me when I said this. I'll continue to double down on it, though. Sam Levitt is definitively better than Quinn Ewers.
Well, look at the stats. Those two numbers and the stats across the board. Quinn Ewers 376 passes this year. He's thrown the ball 376 times. Sam Levitt, 304. About a 70 pass difference there, and Levitt is within 200 yards of Ewers. Levitt, 24 passing touchdowns. Ewers, 26. Quinn has thrown 10 interceptions to Sam Levitt, a true sophomore's 5. And then Texas doesn't have a running back with more than 1,000 yards rushing or more than 5 touchdowns. Cam Scadaboo has 19 touchdowns, 1,500 yards, and he didn't even play the entire season. And then in the receiving category, Texas doesn't have a receiver over 1,000 yards receiving. I don't understand how they got where they got, aside from 2 things. 1, a good defense. 2, a terribly easy SEC schedule. The only teams they played this year, they have no ranked wins. The only teams they played this year that were good were Georgia. Twice, and they lost both of those football games. And the only ranked win you could give them is Clemson, and Clemson limped their way to a playoff by beating SMU, which is the same thing BYU did. I don't think, Richie, after seeing Texas for the last 14 years only win one Big 12 title, when Kansas State or Baylor or TCU are ripping those off, that I'm scared at all of the Longhorns in this game. You can be scared if you want if you're an Arizona State fan, but I've seen this song and dance. I've watched Texas. I've covered the Big 12 long enough to know that when the lights get brightest, Texas, the same as Richie. Do you think there's a large gap between last year's Washington team and this year's Arizona State team? Because I don't. And that Washington team went and beat Texas in the college football playoff.
This ASU team is far more talented than Texas fans are giving them. First and foremost, I've had them running through my comments, and rightfully so. When I stir the pot on my podcast, I want you to flood my comments the same way that if someone else is talking ASU smack, I want you to flood their comments. It's part of sports and everything. Yeah. But there are a lot of Texas fans that are completely dismissing this ASU team. They don't belong on the same field. All this, that, and the other. ASU is way more talented than they are willing to give them credit for. The second thing that has really upset Texas fans that I have said, and I stand firm on this, they have not played up to the absolute potential they have. From top to bottom, best kid to worst kid on that roster, starting to back up on that team across every position. That's one of the best rosters in college football. They should be able to waltz their way to a national championship, but they've not played up to that level. You can look at the scores, like they win by double-digit points on the vast majority of their games, but I feel like looking at that team and looking at a soft SEC schedule, they should have been winning the majority of their games by 20-plus points. And I don't know that a Texas fan can look me in the eyes and tell me that they have not played to the best ability of that roster, which brings up some questions about whether or not they're going to unlock everything against ASU. Yeah. And suddenly everything clicks. This is a driven Texas team, because I know that the SEC has not welcomed them with open arms. There's been some growing pains for sure, but there's a difference between a team that has always been expected to be elite and an ASU team that had absolutely zero expectations going into this year. And yeah, it's just they're very much overlooking this ASU football team. It's much better than they think, and there's I tell you a 90% chance, even if ASU loses this game, which is possible, I just don't see very many scenarios where they don't cover 13.5 points, according to our friends over at FanDuel. That's it. That's a massive line. Yeah. ASU will play a tight game.
House money. They're with house money. Coming up, the ESPN college football, they're rooting against Arizona State. This is Locked On Big 12 and a Locked On Sun Devils crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Look, I was 23 years old. I don't really know what to do with my money. I was just like, okay, it's there. I'm paying for a bunch of subscriptions from Netflix to Premiere Pro to Canva to work stuff, and I'm paying for too many of them, and some of them twice. And Rocket Money helped me stop doing that. I have subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions. You go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today to fix that. Rocket Money has over 5 million users, has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, that's it. It's the subscription tracker that makes things so much easier. And they have their goals they can help you set financially to keep you stable in the future. Cancel unwanted subscriptions. Reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon. 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 Visit them today. Richie Bradshaw of Locked On Sun Devils. Does it feel like ESPN and really every major talking head in college football has counted Arizona State out?
Yes, definitively. 100%.
Is that expected and is it deserved?
Yes to both of them. It's expected because ASU, like we mentioned right before the first break, no one expected them to be at this point. ASU fans didn't expect this. We were hoping year 3, year 4, we'd be really competitive and everything. And ASU's expectation for football as fans is we want to go to good bowl games every year. 8, 9 to 10 win seasons is expected here. The sleeping giant that we've talked about forever, when it wakes up, we're going to be title contenders. And we're closer to that than we thought we were going to be. And it's going to take some time for a lot of other people to understand how good ASU can be and how quickly they are getting to that mark. So now you're in the college football playoff. And there's a lot of teams that don't believe you deserve to be there. And there's a lot of pundits and talking heads and TV shows and websites and podcast hosts that don't believe ASU deserves the spot, and certainly that ASU doesn't have a chance in this game. That's all fine and dandy, and I don't blame you for thinking that. But with that being said, that's not the way you should be looking at this game. This is a better team than people realize. I talked a lot on my show about how this is a team that's playing with a lot of passion and borderline the power of friendship and stuff like that. But there's a lot of really, really good players on this team. And it's a team that can go blow for blow with even some of the best teams in college football. I've said many a times, there's not a single team in the playoff that ASU is going to look at right now and go, yeah, we can't beat them. Texas, they're going to go, we can beat them. Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, whatever. ASU is going to look at those teams and they're going to go, yeah, of course we can beat them. Why wouldn't we be able to? And there's not a lot of reason they can't. They're not as talented. Again, they're more talented than you think, and you're willing to give them credit for. They've got some superstars. They've got a dude who finished 5th in Heisman voting and should have been a lot higher than that. They've got a quarterback that is getting ready to take over college football who already has good playoff odds. They've got a sneaky good defense with a lot of players no one talks about. I understand why no one has talked about them. I understand the disrespect because of where the program has been. But I think a lot of people are hung up on previous years compared to where they're at now.
Kenny Dillingham is, I don't want to put this. He's not like a Lane Kiffin on amazing. Yes. He's not a Lane Kiffin on social media, but he's young. And you know that he's very in tune with headlines. He's very in tune with, he knows who Kirk Herbstreit is, right? He's got the TV on. I can guarantee you that. And there are BYU fans or Baylor fans or Texas Tech fans that just can't stand the guy because he is, to me, a Kim Mulkey, right? When they're in your camp, you love them to death. When they are outside of your camp and you're against them, you hate that person because they're flashy and they win. They back up their flash. They back up their sass by actually winning games. That's who Kenny Dillingham is for me. And I've got a lot of respect for how the passion with which he carries himself in his program. I do. And that being said, does he use this as a message to his team, being counted out as a message? I mean, he's a master motivator. How big of a piece does that play in this?
He's not going to tell you to your face. He's not going to tell it to the media because all offseason he said, yeah, we hear the noise. We deserve the noise. We're just looking forward to proving people wrong. If you think for a second that that's not plastered all over the locker room, either figuratively or literally with headlines and video clips of people discounting ASU, you'd be wrong. I mean, that's one of the fiery emotions that has started for this team is because of everyone counting them out and everyone overlooking ASU and, quite frankly, disrespecting ASU. And again, I understand because of where they are at. But at this point, you got to acknowledge where they are currently. And now in the college football playoff, champions of a Power 4 conference, and you can think whatever you want about the Big 12. I don't care. It's still a really good conference that stacks up with other conferences from top to bottom, like the Big 10. Neither here nor there, though. This is a good football team. And the continual disrespect that they are feeding the ASU just continues to stroke that flame and get ASU more and more motivated. There's not a doubt in my mind that Kenny Dillingham, to your face, will say, yeah, we're not worried about it. But in the locker room, is telling these guys, you going to take that? Are you just going to listen to Kirk Herbstreit talking smack about your team and you're not going to do anything about it? Better step up. You better get ready for this game. Like, he is absolutely one of the driving forces for this team to motivate them. And we can thank the media for that.
I'm going to ask you a tough question here. I don't want to pin you, but there have been so many, even Utah fans, specifically Utah fans, who have come out against the Big 12 or talked about how the Pac-12 was a better situation. Is media different between the Pac-12 and the Big 12, or would Arizona State have been treated the same if they were still in that conference?
I think they would have been treated worse.
Okay.
The Pac-12 just never had the respect. And a lot of it is because they play night games and blah, blah, blah. Like Pac-12 After Dark. And the Big 12 got to inherit some of that this year. And I hope that fans appreciated that, because we can't play football games in 115-degree weather out in Arizona. Come on, we got to play a little later when it's not as hot. But the Pac-12 never got the respect that they deserved. Even in the primes of Oregon and Stanford and that rivalry that they had, it got some attention, but not nearly the amount that some of your other major rivalries get. And Washington, when they had that magical run, their first playoff appearance where they got smacked by Bama, admittedly, but there just was not a lot of respect that was placed on the Pac-12. I thought going from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 would be a drastic upgrade. And it turns out the Big 12 is just as disrespected, but it's still more respect than ASU would have gotten. And at least that partnership with ESPN was helpful to have more people at least know who ASU is, because nobody had the Pac-12 network because no one carried it. So it was a much better situation to go to the Big 12.
Yeah. Richie, really quickly here in 30 seconds or so, is for you and for Arizona State fans, is this an opportunity to introduce the world to who the Sun Devils are?
Big time. And when I made a podcast last week and I said this is a dream matchup for ASU, Texas fans interpreted that as, oh, they think they're going to waltz all over us. Nope. This is a dream matchup because this is a blue blood program and one that everyone is expecting to be a national contender. If you beat them, you're going to let the world know, oh, crap. Yeah, ASU is here. They're here to stay. That's why this is the dream matchup for you. I couldn't have dreamt up one better. Like Oregon, Ohio State are right up there. Texas, that's the one.
Yeah. Coming up, the Arizona State Sun Devils have a legitimate case for being the best new addition to the Big 12. I know Utah or BYU or Cincinnati or UCF are going to cry by the Colorado, but they've gone to the college football playoff first. They of all of the 8, that distinction goes to Arizona State. Let's discuss that with Richie Bradshaw here on a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Sun Devils crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Richie Bradshaw of Locked On Sun Devils. 8 teams came into the Big 12. I remember the day that Texas and Oklahoma left and talking about, okay, well, Baylor could go to the Pac-12. Maybe Oklahoma State goes to the SEC. In the end, we keep everybody together. We grab 4 very solid programs from the Pac-12. We grab 4 from different conferences in the independent ranks. BYU fans would tell you they're number 1. Utah fans would say, hey, we've won 2 Pac-12 championships. We're the best edition. UCF has the recruiting base in Florida, and Colorado has Deion Sanders, and Cincinnati or Houston, or as we talk about these new teams that have been added to the Big 12, Arizona would tell you they're better than Arizona State. Is Arizona State number 1, the best new Big 12 team out of these 8?
Yes. I mean, with how quickly they have established themselves, but like I mentioned earlier, like, you can look at the recent lack of success that ASU has had, and like that's putting it politely. They've been terrible. Yeah. But you look at the history that this program has had, and even the last 10 years, they've been far more successful than they have not been successful. This was always a really good ad for the Big 12, but the recency of what they've done really made it look like it was a bad addition. But ASU historically is a very good football program, and we knew we were going to be back in this sooner rather than later. We had an idea of probably year 3, year 4 of Kenny Dillingham. We were going to be back on the map. We're back way sooner than that. And they made some big-time statement wins this year by beating K-State, by beating BYU, by beating, who was it? Iowa State.
Utah win.
Yeah, the Utah win. Like, they had good wins this year. And some of them were bigger than anyone was going to realize. That BYU game is always hilarious to me. Like, we played a great second half. They couldn't beat us. Played a good first half, like kind of counters each other. They weren't going to win that game. We were just the better team that day. If it's in Provo, I don't know. Maybe it's different. But we were the better team that day and won the game. And we won games all year long. And we just have shown that we are already in that top tier of the Big 12. And at worst, going into next year, you'll be like top 3. But Drake, they're returning probably 80% of that roster, probably even a little bit more. You have had starters and backups that have publicly said on Twitter, yeah, we're running it back next year. Guys who could go pro, nope, we're running it back. This is a team that's built to last. The recruiting is getting better and better. They attack the transfer portal as well as anybody in the country. They're on the rise. The NIL's getting crazy. Yeah, ASU, it was always going to be a great addition. It just so happened it was year 1 instead of year 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's absurd to me that this time last year you could not have come close to arguing for ASU. Reason being, from the Herm Edwards disaster to everything off the field with that, and Kenny Dillingham going 3-9, and you're just staring down the barrel of what could have been a 4-8 Big 12 team this year, and people outside of the program wouldn't have been that surprised. And then UCF would have said, oh, we have recruiting. And Arizona was supposed to be a top 5 Big 12 team, and BYU had a top 10 ranking just a couple of years ago, and Utah had 2 Pac-12 championships. I think you probably would have made a strong case for Utah, but they missed a bowl game this year. Arizona State's going to the college football playoff, the first out of the 8. And while I'm supposed to play Devils, not Sun Devils advocate, but Devils advocate here for the entirety of the conference, it's tough to argue against Kenny Dillingham and company because of what they did this year. And that question, it now evolves into longevity. What are the odds that this is an annual deal for Arizona State, that they're competing for a Big 12 title? They're in the conversation for the 12 because, Richie, we just saw TCU win a college football playoff game. And since then, it's been, okay, just pretty bad. And this year they were okay, met expectations. We don't know how they'll be next year. Can Arizona State have the kind of success long-term that is expected from a BYU fan base or Deion Sanders at Colorado?
Yep, and it's starting off with next year by itself.
Okay.
You're returning the vast majority of that team. You're going to return Levitt and Tyson, majority of your offensive line, your tight end room. Almost the entire defense will be returning to that team as long as they have the eligibility. The coaching staff is going to stay in place. They extended both of their coordinators. Kenny Dillingham's not going anywhere.
Yep.
This team is going to be basically identical to last year's team, and it's going to give them a huge opportunity to run the table once again. No matter how this season ends, it would be inexcusable for the AP poll, coaches poll, whatever, to not have ASU in the top 15 preseason going into next year with everything that is returning and some of the additions they've already made, like Kanye Udo from Army, that running back who's going to replace Cam Scadaboo. Dude, it is a great team. So even if it's just for one more year, and I promise it won't be, but ASU is going to have a repeat successful season next year. And they're just going to continue to get better because the recruiting is getting better and better. They already have a 4-star kid in their 2026 class at quarterback who has a chance to get up to 5 stars because he still has a whole other year, and he's already a really high 4-star kid. Like, it's just a program that is growing at a pace that nobody expected. I didn't expect it. I thought this was going to be a slow but steady progression for the team. I said 7-5 was the record at the start of the year. I thought I was hopelessly optimistic.
Yeah,
they're just so far ahead of the curve, and it's only going to continue to get better for ASU. especially with Dillingham staying. He's not going anywhere despite all the speculation of what if someone pays him more? Well, ASU's NIL is catching up. They're going to be able to pay him just as much, and it's his dream job. And you believe him when he says that too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, ASU's here to stay, Drake.
You know, Richie, I have been courted by some Arizona State athletes who have. I'm well traveled now. I've been to Casamigos. I've been to Scottsdale. I've seen it. It's not too far from Tempe, and there is a very good recruiting pitch to be had in Scottsdale and Tempe and that entire area. I mean, it's not a bad spot to be if you're a college kid or a college athlete, especially. So I know that the Sun Devils can recruit out of the portal as well, and it begs the question from Tempe to Provo to Salt Lake City to Orlando. There are some destinations here where people are taking vacations to Scottsdale. They're taking vacations to Salt Lake City to climb the mountains, the Wasatch. They're going to Orlando to Disney World. And maybe that's not the case for Cincinnati, but they've been to a college football playoff. Maybe that's not the case for a Houston, who you're going to see the Astros, the Texans, maybe not the Cougars, but you have that kind of a metro there. And that goes for Colorado. It goes for all of these 8. Are we in a realm right now where the new 8 are kind of overtaking the spotlight from the original 8 Big 12 teams?
We're going to have to see, because there's a lot of perks that those schools that you brought up have. You've got the reputation of like Oklahoma State. This is a weird year for them.
Yeah.
This is not the norm. They'll be able to bounce back. And if they don't, then I mean, you're talking about a complete catastrophe at that program. But TCU still has a name brand. Baylor has a name brand.
Yeah.
There are programs that are still going to be able to. K-State has a name brand. They'll be able to keep pace. But, I mean, if you talk about pure potential, if Deion stays at Colorado, they're only going to continue to skyrocket. ASU, they're only going to continue to grow. UCF has tons to offer. BYU and Utah are in great positions right now to continue winning football games in beautiful areas of the country. And there's a lot to offer that all these schools have on the table. And Cincinnati, like you said, I don't know too much of what's going on out there, but they're only a few years removed from being the first team that wasn't a Power 5 conference to go to the college football playoff. They have a proven track record of success. There's a lot that these new Big 12 schools offer that, I don't know, maybe in 5 years, we're talking about the conference flipped on its head. And you have those teams ahead of the stalwarts that have been in the Big 12 for decades. Crazy
Richie,
to think.
That it's something that, every team in the Big 12, for me, has to be represented equally by Locked On Big 12. It's tough to do. Look, in a 5-7 year, I can't do near as many shows about Kansas as I do Arizona State, obviously. But I root for the success of all 16, and seeing the progress of the 8 already is kind of wild. Even seeing a Utah who created its brand, who made itself known, and then went 5-7, but it's still known. That's not a bad thing for this conference on the whole. Richie, where can listeners of Locked On Big 12 find more of your work?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at RichieBrads36. That's with a Z for Brads, RichieBrads36. The podcast is on Twitter at LO_Sun Devils. Podcast is wherever you get your shows. YouTube is Locked On Sun Devils. I interact with just about everyone I can. Recently, Texas fans have been blowing me up, so do me a favor. Get in those comments and help defend your boy, because I'm fighting for my life right now.
I love it, Richie. Well, thanks so much for joining Locked On Big 12 for a crossover today. This has been, it always will be, Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Sun Devils and Dose Grande.